Kev G, weather overview. We got some wild weather over the next 7 days from coast to coast. And initially, the New York City tri-state area is going to not really be in all of this wild weather. There's tornadoes, there's flooding, there's winter storm conditions that are prevalent in the lower 48 states, especially in the Pacific Northwest, where we have this storm that's currently moving on shore, which is a powerhouse. And then we've got one over the upper Midwest that's spawning heavy snow. For our neck of the woods, it's going to be showers for Wednesday rather, and some wind on Thursday, and that wind will be gusty. So if you want to know more about that, check on the video below this one. But I want to focus on the Sunday night and the Monday storm because I think we have an interesting situation that you don't often see a lot, and it has to do with a blocking pattern. So let's take a look at the here and now and then what happens later on. If we turn our attention to this system off of California, it's very wrapped up, it's very vigorous, it's going to produce a tremendous amount of snow, rain, and wind for the Pacific Northwest and portions of California and the Intermountain West. That storm is going to make its way across the United States, and as it does so, it's going to increasingly slow down, especially when it gets to the eastern seaboard. And that's where things become very complicated around the tri-state area, particularly when we're talking about Sunday night and Monday. So when we look at the upper air map for Thursday morning, the storm that's going to bring us all that wind for Thanksgiving, that's already off the playing field. All these maps are courtesy of Tropical Tidbits, by the way. The storm that gives us all the wind for Thanksgiving starts to make its way into the North Atlantic. Now, usually these storms keep humming along, and they eventually make their way towards the North Pole in one form or another. But this time, the storm that moves off the coast for Thursday starts to re-intensify, and it starts to slow down. It's almost creating like a traffic jam across the atmosphere. This is an atmospheric traffic jam, and this means trouble for these parts. So anywhere that gets affected by these blocking patterns, it's going to be a very problematic forecast. It's going to be very hard to figure out who gets what in terms of precipitation and when the actual precipitation leaves and how intense the storm is going to be. So by the time we get into Friday, the storm that made it off the coast for Thanksgiving is still sitting there. The storm that's in the Intermountain West right now, making its way onto the Pacific Northwest, starts to make a beeline for the eastern seaboard. But it only gets so far before it starts to slow down by the time we get into Sunday afternoon, Sunday night. And if you notice, the storm that was the player for Thanksgiving that gave us all the wind, it's still noticeable out in the North Atlantic. It's slowing everything down. So the question is going to be, the million-dollar question is going to be for Sunday night and Monday, if we look at what's going on, does the storm from the Pacific Northwest spawn a new storm for Sunday night and Monday? And I think the answer is yes. Okay, I'm not really uncertain about that part. What I am uncertain about is, where does that actually happen? And what kind of track does this storm take? So if we look at one of the run of the models, and this is not to be trusted at this point, but it's just to illustrate what's going on, we start to get into some rain and a rain-snow mix for Sunday afternoon, Sunday night. It's basically rain along the coast as the Pacific powerhouse, we'll call it, moves toward the eastern seaboard. But then by Sunday night and Monday, this storm can't go anywhere. It's not able to move out into the Atlantic so quick. So the question becomes, do you get an intense coastal storm which can deliver snow or a rain-snow mix for Sunday night and Monday? And I think the worst-case scenario would be that we wake up Monday morning with several inches of snow on the ground and maybe even continuing for New York City, Long Island, and points to the north. Now, just as easily, this storm could be further south, adding to the confusion. So this is something to stay tuned about. This is something to keep in the back of your mind if you're traveling, especially if you're going back to work on Monday morning. This is going to be a player. I just don't know what type of weather it's going to bring at this time. I don't know how intense the storm is going to be, but I do know that it's going to be slow moving and that it's going to be something where we're just going to have to track it over the next couple of days to see if the models can resolve how this all plays out. So a complicated forecast as we start the month of December with an East Coast storm of some intensity, I believe, that should be there by the time we get to Sunday night and Monday. And the question is going to be track and intensity of the aforementioned storm as we go into early next week.